Chapter 1. Lily. I stood in front of the old wooden glass door as I pocketed the keys to the Cozy Nook bookshop. A few weeks ago, Aunt Mimi had signed her bookstore over to me. She said it felt like giving me her baby, but I loved the shop as much as my aunt did. We had worked together for the last 12 years. I had attended the University of Maine and majored in history. I had always wanted to be a teacher, but jobs were scarce, and after substituting for a few years, I moved back to my hometown of Pembroke Cove, Maine. Aunt Mimi hired me as soon as my suitcase was unpacked. Spending time with my aunt learning the business had been the best experience. I offered to buy the business when she wanted to retire, but she wouldn't hear of it. As long as she had free books for life and her long-term boyfriend, Nate, she said it was a fair deal. From my point of view, I had a built-in backup for years to come. Now that I was a bookshop owner, Aunt Mimi was no longer coming in every day, which meant her cat, Phoenix, wasn't either. The space felt empty without a kitty laying in the window or skulking about as kitties do. I was off to the Pembroke Animal Palace to see if I could find a match. It was a short walk in the bright noonday sun. The spring air from the ocean carried a tang of salt, but the breeze was refreshing. I waved to one of my best friends, Gage Erickson, as he drove past in his police-issued sedan. My heart fluttered in my chest. He was a detective on the force. Not that we had much crime in our small seaside town, but one of these days, I was going to get brave and confess that I had been carrying a torch for him since we were in the 9th grade. What was the worst thing that could happen? We'd still be best friends, right? I continued down the sidewalk, waving to William from the Sweet Spot Bakery. He was sweeping the sidewalk wearing a large, pristine white apron and a wide smile. A deep inhale confirmed my suspicion. He was baking cookies. My mouth watered. I did a half turn and went back to where he was finishing up. "Hello, William." I bobbed my head in the direction of the shop. "What is that tantalizing smell?" He held open the brightly polished glass door. "One of your favorites, Lily. Chocolate chip and pecan cookies. Can I interest you in one before you continue on your mission?" I gave him a sidelong look. "Mission?" He chuckled. "Over the years, my Lulu would say you had 2 speeds, strolling and purposeful. Just now, it was your purposeful speed, so hence, you're on a mission." I'm going to the shelter in hopes of finding a kitty. The shop is lonely now that Phoenix is home every day with Aunt Mimi. I feel a cat napping in the window adds an air of serenity to the place. "Unless you're allergic." He had a point, but not willing to be deterred. I smiled. "I'm always happy to deliver to a customer if that's the case." I leaned over the glass bakery case like a kid pressing her nose against the candy case. "You made sugar cookies, too, and frosted them?" I sighed. I was going to need to exercise more if he continued to bake all my favorites. I looked up, and he was smiling at me like an indulgent grandfather. "Are the chocolate pecan ready?" He wiggled his eyebrows. "I have a tray cooling in the back." "Then can I have one of those, and a sugar cookie? But to go?" With a flick of his wrist, he snapped open a white bakery bag and called over his shoulder, "Jerry Lynn, would you please bring out the last batch of cookies?" I heard a muffled, "Coming," and smiled. I'm glad Jerry Lynn stayed on. I didn't say anything about his beloved wife, Lulu, passing away. It was too painful for us all. He nodded. "Me too. She's a hard worker and is excellent with customers." Jerry Lynn bustled in from the back room carrying a large stainless steel tray. It was lined with parchment paper and cookies the size of the palm of my hand. It was going to taste so good later with a hot cup of tea. William slipped 2 in the bag, along with 2 sugar cookies. He handed the bag to me. I paid for my cookies and thanked him. "Stop by the shop later. You might just get to meet my new fur baby." "Sounds like a plan." He grinned and crossed his arms over his rounded midsection. "You're more like your aunt than you realize. Ever since she opened that bookshop, she's had a cat, too." I paused, tucked the bakery bag in my tote, and with my hand on the door, I gave him a wide grin. "And now it's time to carry on the tradition." With a jaunty wave, I called, "Wish me luck." I reached the old cedar-shingled building with a bright blue door. It had been many businesses over the course of its life. Now it was occupied by the animal shelter. I considered what kind of cat I'd want. An older cat that was all cuddly and would want to snuggle at night while I was reading a good book or watching old movies. Or would a younger kitten be a better choice so that our chances of having many years together would be optimal? Would there even be a cat that I'd connect with? This wasn't the first time I had tried to adopt one. Each time, it just didn't feel right. Or maybe I wasn't ready at the time. I marched up the granite steps, and the heavy wood door swung open with ease. I stepped inside and noticed the smell of pine cleaner tickled my nose. The lobby was empty except for a young woman sitting behind the desk. I approached it and smiled at her. "Hello, I'm Lily Michaels, and I'd like to see cats that are available for adoption." The young lady lifted her head and pulled her earbuds out. With a shy smile, she said, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" I was listening to a lecture from one of my classes. I wasn't upset she hadn't heard me, but it was nice to know she was doing something so worthwhile. "What are you studying?" She perked up. "I'm going to be a doctor, a vet." With a blush, she said, "I'm here to do an internship for the summer." She stuck out her hand. "Judy Blume. And yes, my mom's favorite book was written by Judy Blume." "It's very nice to meet you, and welcome to Pembroke Cove. I hope you enjoy the summer here. There's nothing like the Cove in June." I leaned forward. "As long as the weather holds. It can be chilly." "Thanks for the intel. How can I help you?" She snapped her fingers and bobbed her head. "Wait, you said you wanted to see our cats." She whisked the chair back and grinned. "Don't you just love chairs on wheels?" Her bright and cheery outlook could put a smile on anyone's face. "They certainly come in handy." I followed through the pale blue door behind the desk. "We'll go right into the cat room. There are a few others that just came in, so they're waiting for a vet check before we mix them with the others. But I can show you those, too." We entered a good-sized room. Scattered about were scratching posts, a few kitty condos where several cats were lounging, and lots of toys. "They've all been spayed or neutered, so after a quick check on you and your landlord, we can send one home with you." I own my house, so no landlord to call. I moved slowly around the room. I crouched down to scratch behind ears, but so far, not one kitty looked up with an inquisitive gaze to meet mine. Again, no connection, but they were all so darn cute. I realized I really did want to find a fur-ever friend. Judy was giving me space to interact with the cats, and after picking a couple up, there was no zip. I gave her a look that I'm sure expressed my disappointment. "How about we try the room next door?" We went into the room next to the first one, and it was much of the same. I picked up a black cat, which reminded me of Phoenix, but there was only one in our family. I gave him a kiss on the head and put him down too. "I guess I'll have to come back another day." She snapped her fingers, and if I had to guess, she did that often. "There's a great tabby that was picked up yesterday. He's in an isolation room waiting for the vet. Poor baby, he's in great shape, but he was found just wandering around, and he isn't microchipped. The director thinks he's a stray since he's never seen him around before. She opened the door. Wait until you see him. He's a very handsome little dude. Intrigued, I followed her into a small examination room. Sitting on the side chair was a gray tabby with a long tail, and Judy had been right. He was adorable. His eyes locked on mine, and he watched me closely as I crossed the short distance between us. I picked him up and held him close to my chest. Instantly, he began to purr a low, comforting sound, and he tucked his head under my chin. Tears sprang to my eyes. This was my kitty. Judy said quietly, "I'm going to leave you two so you can get better acquainted." She slipped from the room, and I placed him on the chair and dropped to the floor. Under the chair was a little mouse. I could smell the faint aroma of mint. Catnip. "Hey, little man, do you want to play?" The cat tipped his head and stared at me. Instead of tossing the mouse, I stretched out my legs and patted my lap. "Come sit with me." He dropped graciously to the floor and crept closer, taking his own sweet time. He turned around once, twice, and a third time before finally settling on my lap. He tucked his front paws under his chest, and his eyes closed to mere slits. And once again, he began that soft, low purr. That's when I knew we were a bonded pair. As I scratched his head, I said, "What should I call you? That is, if you want to come home with me." He rolled over on his back and put his paws up in the air, exposing his belly. I laughed. "I'll take that as a yes." We sat there for several minutes, the cat purring and me trying to come up with a name. "What should I call you?" The cat stopped purring and flipped over to a sitting position. He looked me directly in the eye. Instantly, I knew. His name was Milo. It took 3 days for Milo and me to become a little family. The minute I carried the cat carrier in the house and set it down, he put his paw on the metal door and meowed very loudly. He wanted out. I was going to let him explore to his heart's content while I set up his food and water bowls. When I finished, I turned around and saw him staring at me from the kitchen table. I picked him up and set him on the tile floor. "Go explore your new home." He tipped his head, and I wondered if he was nervous. There was no way to tell what he had gone through before being taken to the shelter. I opened the bag of salmon treats and gave him one. He took it delicately from my fingers. "All right, I'll give you the grand tour. I hope you like it here." I walked from the kitchen into the living room and pointed to the sofa and recliner. "No scratching the furniture. Got it?" He tipped his head to the side and blinked. "I'm going to take that as a yes." I walked from room to room, showing him the office and my bedroom. In the window seat, I sat down and patted a small cushion. "I thought you might like to snooze here." Milo hopped up and looked out the window before settling down. "I'm going to take that as it's kitty approved." The doorbell rang. I left to answer it, surprised that Milo was on my heels. I pulled it open, and there was Gage.
"Hi, Lily. I thought I'd drop by with some fish for dinner, and I wanted to meet Milo."
He crouched down.
"Hey, little man. It's good to meet you, and I brought enough fish for you, too."
He scratched Milo's ears, and I could have sworn the cat nodded to him in agreement. Typically, Gage and I had dinner a couple of nights a week, and this was usually how it happened. He'd pick up something and swing by. I loved the spur of the moment as much as I think he did. It was a habit we had fallen into when I bought the house last year. When I stayed with Aunt Mimi, we hadn't seen each other nearly as much. I often wondered why he wasn't finding his partner in crime. But hey, I wasn't about to complain. I liked being with him, and I always did the dishes when he cooked. I could feed myself, but my best friend Nikki cooked when I had guests over. Come on in. I took the package of fish from him. We just got home, and I was showing Milo around. At the sound of his name, he wound around my legs and then Gage's. I scooped him up. You're such a smart kitty. I kissed him on his tiny pink nose before we walked into the kitchen. Anything going on down at the station today? I pointed to the cupboard, indicating he could set the table.
The usual.
He paused with his hand on the cupboard handle.
There was something odd. Any chance I can bounce a few things off you?
I pulled out the chair and sat down. My blood started to pump. Anytime Gage asked for my opinion, there was usually a small mystery to solve, and that was right up my alley. I'm all ears. Milo hopped up on the table, his soft fur sliding against my skin, and sat at my elbow. With a laugh, I said, I guess you've got 2 sets of ears now. Shoot. He took a seat too and leaned forward.
It's not that big of a deal, but you have a great mind for sifting through clues.
Chapter 2. Lily. Gage said,
I drove by the Sweet Spot Bakery on my way over, and the lights were on from the back. In the moment, I didn't think anything about it, but now I want to go back and check it out. Care to ride along?
I looked at Milo. We just got home. I know it sounds crazy, but I'd hate to leave him so soon. If Gage was upset that I was concerned for my kitty, he didn't seem annoyed.
Bring him along. Isn't that why you got the cat carrier, to take him to work?
I sighed. This was why he was my best friend. Thanks for understanding. I opened up the door to the soft-sided carrier. Come on, Milo. We're off to check out the bakery. He strolled in like this was something he had been doing for a long time. He turned around and stretched out, crossing his paws over each other. I reached through the screen and rubbed his toes. Cooing, I said, You're such a sweetie. I could have sworn he winked at me. Gage took the carrier and held the back door for me.
I'm probably making a big deal over nothing, but I'll feel better.
Of course. Besides, it's a beautiful evening. Maybe we can swing by the Cozy Nook bookshop, and I'll give Milo the grand tour. He chuckled softly as he set the carrier between us in the front.
You do know he's not a human, right?
I laughed. That's what you think. I leaned over the carrier and said, Milo, you can understand every word I say, can't you, baby? Milo looked up and slowly blinked and then put his head back down. I slapped my hands on the dashboard. Did you see that? He knows exactly what I'm saying. In a few minutes, we were puttering down Main Street in the early evening hours. Most of the shops were dark with only security lights glowing. As we slowed in front of the bakery, Gage had been right. Lights from the kitchen section were on.
I'll pull around back.
He eased the truck down the narrow side street 2 storefronts over and parked in one of the 2 big spots next to William's delivery van. Flashing me a quick look, he said,
The back door is ajar.
I put my hand on Milo's carrier and opened the car door and closed it very gently to not make a sound. Gage had done the same. We approached the door, and he said,
Stay behind me.
I nodded and clutched the carrier handle tighter. For half a moment, I considered taking Milo back to the car, but Gage was already easing the door open the rest of the way.
William?
He called out, but there was no answer. The kitchen was brightly lit, and I held my breath as I half expected to find William lying on the floor. Relief washed over me when he wasn't in the kitchen. We made our way through the archway into the bakery itself. Here, evening shadows filled every corner. Gage walked to the front door and checked the door lock. I set the carrier on the floor. "Hey, Gage, come look at this." In front of me was the register, and the cash drawer was open and empty except for coins. He hurried back to my side and asked,
"Did you touch anything?"
"No, but someone else did." I took a step back so he could get a better look. As I did, I bumped into Milo's carrier and the door sprang open. He shot out and began to prowl around the room. "Milo, come here." When he seemed to ignore me, I tried using a sing-song voice. "Milo, come here, little boy." But he continued to prowl around the room, and then he sat down under a table. When he finally settled, he meowed. I noticed he had his paw on a square piece of paper. "What have you got there?" I bent over and picked it up and scooped Milo into my arms in one motion. "You can't be walking around in here. I'm sure we're violating health codes." He began to purr, and all was right in his world. Gage looked at us and held up his phone.
"I'm going to call William and see if this is how he left the building today. I'll ask him to come down. I suspect it's been a break-in, and he can check to see if anything else is missing."
"I'm going to take Milo over to the shop, and I'll be back." Gage picked up the carrier and handed it to me.
"Go out the front in case anyone is lurking, and I can watch you cross the town square."
I wrinkled my nose. "I'm capable of walking across the park." He touched my arm.
"Humor me occasionally?"
I relented. There wasn't much I wouldn't do for Gage. "I won't be long. I want to be here when William gets in." I hurried across the street and withdrew the old-fashioned key from my jacket pocket and unlocked the wooden door. With a flick of the switch, the space was brightly lit. I placed Milo on one of the wing-back chairs in what I like to think is the reader's nook and dropped a kiss on his head. "I love you, little man, but I'm going to talk to William. You be good, and we'll go home soon." I locked up behind me, but left the lights on. I was glad I thought to leave a water and food bowl out along with a cat box, just in case this took longer than I thought. When I got back to the bakery, William North was in the kitchen talking with Gage. There was a picture on the wall of William with his arm around his beloved wife, Lulu. They had been the sweetest couple and had been married for over 30 years. The smile on their faces in the photo was priceless. Inwardly, I sighed. "What it must be like to have someone love you like that," he said.
"I know I locked the back door when I closed up for the day. I don't have any idea how someone could have gotten in." The lights were on when I drove past on my way to Lily's, and when I mentioned it to her,
his eyes caught mine, and he smiled.
"I had to come back and check it out."
"I'm glad you did." I gave him a reassuring smile. William said,
"I'd hate to think the bakery would have been unlocked all night." "Any idea how much money was in the cash register?"
Gage walked over to the open drawer.
"Not much. I leave 200 and small bills for the start of the next day. It's easier when I cash out at the end of each day."
I peered over his shoulder and said, "It seems they took it all." I stuck my hand in my pocket and withdrew the folded paper. "Do you remember who the last customers of the day were?"
"Same as always. Some of the middle school kids stop in for a cookie. I always mark them down half price in case someone wants one."
I nodded and glanced at the paper. On the top right, scrawled in less than perfect penmanship, was Stuart Caldwell. "Do you remember the names of any of the kids?"
"Joey Griffin and Stewie. They were fighting when they came in, and then Stuart paid for the 2 cookies, and they left. I remember neither of them looked happy."
William lifted a shoulder with a small shrug.
"Maybe the cookie helped smooth out the rough edges of the day. It's tough being a kid."
I nodded. Well, that was interesting. Gage cocked a brow, and I knew he suspected I was putting the puzzle pieces together. I gave him a wink and held up the paper.
William, I've called this into the station. If you want to go home, I'll make sure we lock up before we leave. Thank you, Gage. That's very kind of you.
His voice faltered, and his face had gotten considerably pale.
Yes, I'd like to go home. Will you call me later and bring me up to speed? It's been a long day.
With a promise to call after the police checked out every square inch, the older man left through the back door. I watched him get in his car and waited until the door closed. Gage called for a couple of detectives to swing by. After he put his phone in his jacket pocket, I asked, "Is William ill?" Gage pulled his gaze away from the door.
I don't know. He hasn't been the same since Lulu passed.
He gestured to the paper I was holding.
What did you find?
I handed it to him. Actually, Milo was sitting next to it when he got out of his carrier. It looks like Stuart dropped it when he left. Maybe we should swing by and drop it off when we're done here. This way, we won't need to tell his teacher he lost his homework. He smiled at me.
It's better than the dog ate it.
You're too funny, but there's something else. And I might be jumping to conclusions, but the boys were the last people out of the bakery. Maybe William forgot to lock the front door. He certainly didn't see this paper, and we both know he's meticulous when it comes to the shop, so something had to distract him. Gage walked around the front of the room.
That paper was the only thing you found?
I nodded. Yes. I walked from the counter to the front door and back again. Depending if the boy lost it coming in or leaving doesn't matter, but I'll bet it was coming in. When they left, the breeze from the door must have blown it under the table.
Makes sense.
He narrowed his eyes.
What else is going on behind those pretty brown eyes of yours?
I could feel the heat flush my cheeks at his compliment. I lowered my gaze, not wanting to look directly into his eyes. Hopefully, he couldn't hear my heart thumping wildly in my chest. Just a feeling, but I'll know more when we drop off the homework. After over 20 years of friendship, I would have to turn the pieces of this puzzle over and over in my head before I'd share. It was like this when we played board games, cards, or even worked on a jigsaw puzzle. I let the thoughts gel until they slid together. And if my intuition was to be trusted, there was more to half-price cookies than met the eye. Chapter 3. Lily. The police detectives made quick work of taking pictures and double-checked what Gage had said about the front and back door. They had taken fingerprints, but guessed all they'd get for good ones would be William. But it didn't hurt to try. After they left, I bobbed my head in the direction of my bookshop. "I'll get Milo and meet you in front of the store in a couple of minutes." Gage looked at the growing darkness.
Just be careful.
With a shake of my head, I grabbed the cat carrier and asked, "What do you think I do when you're not around?" His smile faded, and he said,
Stay wrapped up in an Afghan in your living room?
I hooted with laughter. The idea of me sitting still long enough to get wrapped up in anything other than a book was crazy. I patted his hand. 5 minutes. The door lock clicked as soon as I walked out the front door, and I tried the handle. It was definitely locked. There was a small white bakery bag on the ground, and I bent over to pick it up and toss it into the trash can when it felt heavy. I peered inside, and it contained an iced sugar cookie that was in perfect condition. I paused and thought of the boys getting cookies. Was it possible they didn't like today's special? Rather than be rude to William, they took it only meaning to throw it out? I thought growing boys ate anything and everything that crossed their path. I tossed it in the bin and jogged across the grass to my shop. Within a few minutes, I'd retrieved Milo, and he was nestled in his carrier. The two of us were standing on the brick sidewalk when Gage pulled up. I stowed the carrier between Gage and me and buckled up. We're going by the Cardwells, right?
Yes, and then I called in a pizza. I figure we can eat the fish tomorrow night.
He stuck his finger into Milo's carrier and scratched the top of his head.
Sorry, little buddy, but I promise there will be fish tomorrow.
Dinner 2 nights in a row was a treat. I looked out the side window so Gage couldn't see how big my smile actually was. Sounds good to me. About 5 minutes later, Gage pulled up in front of an old 2-story home on Drake's Lane. I leaned over Milo's carrier. We won't be gone long, so be good. The kitty glared at me with large green eyes. Gage and I walked up the front path together, and I held the schoolwork in my hand. I rang the bell, and we waited until the door swung open. Standing in front of us was Mrs. Caldwell, and behind her, I could see the house was overflowing with children. Hello, can I help you? I extended my hand. I'm Lily Michaels, and this is Gage Erickson. He's a detective on the Pembroke Cove police force. Her eyes grew wide. Is someone hurt? Her hand clutched the middle of her t-shirt as color drained from her face. No. There was a problem down at the Sweet Spot Bakery, and we understood your son stopped in today for a cookie. I found something that belongs to him, and I'd like to give it back. Over her shoulder, she yelled, Stewie, come here! The sound of feet pounding on the stairs was the first indication that he was coming down. Mrs. Caldwell gestured for us to come inside. I'm sorry about the mess. It's hard to keep up with a bunch of kids. She averted her eyes as I took in the room. The furniture had seen better days. The wood floor was scratched and could use an area rug to make it seem homey. That's fine. We did just drop by without calling first. You should see my house after a long day. She gave me an appreciative smile. You're very kind. It was apparent the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders, and when we were back in the car, I'd asked Gage what the situation was and how the town could help out. Hey, Ma, what's up? Standing before us was a boy who could have been much younger than 11. His growth spurt must not have kicked in yet. His ashy blonde hair hung over one eye, his t-shirt was torn with a little grease, and his jeans were skimming his ankles just above his sneakers. Ms. Michaels and Detective Erickson came to see you. He took a step back, and his mouth gaped open. I held out his homework. We found this at the Sweet Spot Bakery. I understand you came in today for a cookie? He stammered, It wasn't me. And there it was. I didn't say a word. Gage stiffened next to me. I casually touched Gage's hand, signaling him to give it a moment before he started asking questions. Do you want to talk about it? His chin sunk to his chest, and his voice was low when he answered. No. Mrs. Caldwell placed a hand on his thin shoulder. Where did you get the money for a cookie? Joey wanted to stop, and Mr. North always gives it to us for half the price. He looked up. It's no big deal, Ma. Promise. She looked at me, and I didn't falter. What else happened today? Nothing. He pretended to look at me, but he stared at my chin. Care to try again? I think there is a little more to the story. I wanted him to come clean about the money, and by the looks of the house, he might have thought he was doing a good thing, but there were better ways to go about helping your mother. If that was his motivation. Stuart? Gage's deep voice was a distinct contrast to mine. You might want to talk to Lily here, or we can take a ride to the police station and talk there. His mother opened her mouth, and I hoped she'd let this play out. I always wanted to be the good cop. It wasn't my idea. He dropped to the bottom step and buried his head in his hands. You gotta believe me. I knelt down next to him. Tell me what happened, and also why. We can go from there. Stuart looked at his mother. I'm so sorry, Ma. You're going to be so mad at me. She scowled. Only if you don't tell the truth. Not saying there won't be consequences for whatever you might have done wrong, but you know how I feel about honesty. Yes, ma'am. He propped his elbows on his knees, and with his head in his cupped hands, he said, Just so you know, I didn't know what Joey wanted to do when we walked in there. I waited just like Gage would have done with me. Patience was the key. Joey offered to buy me a cookie today, and I really liked the big sugar ones. You know, the kind with all the frosting. He gave me a hopeful look, like I would understand how tempting those were. When I didn't respond, he said, Joey was going to buy the cookies, and when he did, Mr. North opened the cash register drawer to make the change. Joey's eyes got real big, and after we were done paying, we went out the front door. But Joey looked through the window, and when Mr. North went in the back room, he snuck inside, and I followed him. I thought he wanted to get another cookie on account he dropped his on the ground. That explained the cookie. Now for the money. We hid under a table in the very back, and after he locked the front door and left, we waited a couple more minutes. Joey said that was how they did it in the movies. I wanted to roll my eyes at what kids were watching on television, but I kept a steady gaze on the boy. He said if I wanted to be a part of his cool kids group and sit with them at lunch, I had to take the money. His lower lip began to quiver. I didn't want to, but some of his friends have been picking on me, calling me a loser and stuff. Joey said they wouldn't do that anymore if I was in the group. My blood began to heat in my veins, and I clenched my fists. Bullies. So you opened the cash register and took the money? Stuart nodded, and now the tears began to slide down his cheeks. I'm sorry. I know it was wrong, but he said I'd be a cool kid. Gage took a step forward. What did you do with the money, Stuart? Joey has it. He put it in his backpack and said he was going to show it to all the kids at school. That was his proof that I was cool. His mother had her fist balled, covering her mouth. I'm not sure if she was holding back anger, hurt, or tears. Probably all three. He jumped up and flung his arms around his mother's body. I'm sorry, Ma, but I didn't keep the money or spend any of it. Doesn't that count for something? She looked at me over his head and then dropped to her knees so she could look him in the eye. You took something that didn't belong to you, and tomorrow we're going to see Mr. North, and you'll offer to do chores for him. The boy nodded. But before that, we're going to the school tomorrow. I want to talk to the principal and find out what they can do to stop these boys from bullying you. She brushed his hair back from his eyes. You should have told me as soon as it started happening. Stuart pulled himself up tall. I was trying to take care of it myself. Daddy said, when he went back crabbing, that I needed to be the man of the house while he was gone. Mrs. Caldwell pulled her son to her chest. Everyone needs help now and then. So the next time, we'll talk about it and figure out the best way to handle the problem, okay? Okay, Ma. He clung to her tighter. I shifted from one foot to the other now, feeling like an intruder on a private moment. I gestured to Gage that we should leave, but he shook his head and mouthed, No. Stuart, how about I come to your class tomorrow and talk to everyone about why being a bully is bad and how it can get you into serious trouble? The boy's eyes grew wide. That's gonna make it worse. He looked at me. Do you think you can come with Mr. Erickson? I kept a smile from spreading across my face. I can, but he is a detective on the police force, and I run the cozy book nook in town. With his face full of pleading and his eyes even wider, I relented. But yes, I'll come with the detective, and we can talk about it. He pulled away from his mother and threw his arms around me, almost hugging the stuffing right out of me. Thank you, Ms. Michaels. You're welcome. You understand we're going to Joey's house next, and before we go to school, he might try and talk to you. But you stand up for doing the right thing, and if you have any problems, you can talk to us when we get to school tomorrow. He had stopped crying and stuck out his hand to Gage. Thank you, Detective. I really am sorry. But how did you know it was me? Gage smiled at me.
I didn't. Lily has an amazing mind for taking clues and figuring out the puzzle. I guess you could say she has a little magic.
After we said goodnight, Gage and I walked down the front path to the car, and much to my surprise, Milo was lounging on the dashboard. Had I forgotten to secure the latch, or did I have a feline Houdini on my hands? Gage draped his arm around my shoulder and brushed his lips across my cheek.
Once again, we made a great team in there, and you cracked the cookie caper.
I gave him a cheeky grin. Who knows? Maybe this is the start of an amateur sleuth and detective relationship. Gage laughed.
As long as we don't start tracking down murderers, we'll be just fine.
I smiled to myself. I was up for the challenge if the need arose. After all, I loved solving puzzles of any kind. This has been Cookies and Capers, a Bookstore Cozy Mystery prequel. Written by Lucinda Race. Narrated by Megan Kelly. Copyright 2023. Production copyright 2025.